Welcome to Hamburg. Welcome to the Reeperbahn Festival. Welcome, a very warm welcome to the Academy of Sound of Tone, Academy of Tone, number 74. Number 74. Nils
Finkeisen
und Thomas und you. A very warm welcome, and now it starts. Bye-bye.
And by the way, this was Kuno. Maybe You know him lately from Hamburg 1 television, but he is actually the former owner of the famous Star Club. He was actually doing this place, and it ended, unfortunately, on New Year's Eve 1969. So this gentleman has been there, he's been around, he's seen all the bands, and he was, well, deep into the Hamburg scene. So anyway, thanks Kuno for the little introduction of us here being in Hamburg. Well, Hamburg, what a place, and this is why I have a handheld mic, because outside on the Reeperbahn Festival there are live bands playing. We are here inside in a little tent. Well, little tent, it's a tent about, I have no idea, 50 meters or whatever. It's quite a tent. And on this exhibition, we have a few brands out here, Maybach guitars, Paul Reed Smith guitars, Gretsch guitars, Casio keyboards, Kawai pianos, and, of course, the big and nice booth of Number One Guitar Center Hamburg. And this is a very, very special place because I'm here to shoot a couple of videos about vintage guitars from Number One Guitar Center here. And I would like to introduce our dear friend Thomas Weilbier. Thomas is co-founder and still running the Number One Guitar Center Hamburg. And by the way, that's the place where I bought this 1961 Stratocaster at age 17. And, well, Thomas, let us know how the whole thing started and what made you sell vintage instruments besides having a regular music store.
Thank you for having me here. It's a very long story that I can tell you now, but to make a long story short, as you know, you had been 17 years when you bought your first Strat, and you played guitar very well when you had been 17. When I had been 14, I think I tried to play guitar, and everybody dreamed to be a rock star. And if you went with your guitar case in school, you had been the king of the school, even with an empty guitar case, as you know all the time. But okay, I also made music at this time in local Hamburg bands. And then the Hamburg scene was in Germany very special because of rock and roll music and not so much pop. We had more rock and roll and blues in this type. And we had a Hamburg scene with famous people that are now famous, like Otto Walkes, Udo Lindenberg, Marius Müller-Westernhagen, and we had one international band that was only 100 kilometers far away from us, the Scorpions. And I know all the band from 77 when they came into Hamburg. It was, at this time there was not a no vintage guitars, and there had been used guitars at this time. And so all the people like Michael Schenker was often in the shop, Rudolf Schenker, he became very, let's say, good with the Flying V guitar. He feels good. It was his guitar, so he bought the first Flying V at Number One. Michael bought his first Flying V. This is now our logo also. And we also made a demonstration with Rudolf's Flying V together. And, you know, it had been used guitars, and nobody believed in real that these guitars, that Flying V cost $3,500, $3,700 USA dollars, let's say like this, 7,000 marks at this time, believed that they going up in price so high. And so then I started working at this time, the name was not Number One Guitar Center, it was Music Center. I started working there on Saturdays, and then I quit my work at the bank and then worked full-time at Music Center, and we named it later on with my partner Number One Guitar Center. And then after, well, let's say 82, 84, 85, the prices went up so crazy. And so it started to be a vintage, a historic instrument scene at this time.
So Thomas, you built up this business kind of by nature, And who are some of the famous guys that bought from you? I can see there's a Bonamassa amplifier here just behind me. Yeah. I mean, do we have a few names that we can listen?
Oh yeah, I think Joe was in the 80s, not touring, let's say like this, but you have to understand at this time we had no real telephone, no mobile telephone, you had no computer, nothing. So all the bands that played in Hamburg came to the store and wanted to see what is new on the market, or how does an orange box, for example, sound, or is there another Fats coming on the market from Schaller. So it was a totally different situation. And we had customers like Keith Richards, we had Johnny Winter, we had Alexis Corner. He was often with us. We still have his big photo where he says, "You still have the best guitars." He fell in love with the Black Everly Brothers that Keith Richards bought later from us. So he still has the Everly Brothers. And we had Pink Floyd, we had the Hollies, we had, I can't remember, the Scorpions, the German people. And later on in the 80s, Joe Cocker came on tour. You had people like T.M. Stevens working with us. Then Michael Jackson went on tour. We had Ricky Lawson, the drummer, because we also had drums at this time, but we came very friendly. And it built up a friendship from this time where we still are in contact at the moment, but on a friendly base, because business is done on the other side.
So, from your experience with all these nice vintage guitars, we started to make a series, The World of Vintage Guitars, where I have the honor and pleasure to play some of the most sought-after vintage pieces. I played 59 Les Pauls, I played 60 Les Pauls, I played Rudolf Schenker's Flying V. Some of the videos will still be published in the future, but I shot a few are shot here on this stage, me being here, and you will see them by the end of the year or whatever. So the great thing about the World of Vintage Guitars, which is kind of a video series where I have the chance to play them, for me, is to get my hands on guitars, which I usually wouldn't. And it's fun to play like a 61 ES330 or the 67 over there, which I did today. And for me, there's still a mojo about vintage instruments. How do you feel about the vintage thing? I mean, you've seen so many guitars. You sell new guitars, old guitars. What's the thing about the vintage guitars for you?
It's not easy to explain. I think if you have musicians in a class where you play, you can feel it. So you have to come to a certain stage, level, where you say, okay, I play my song with a brand new, for example, Gibson Les Paul, and then I play my song with a 59 original one. And then this guitar makes something different with you. You feel different. You play the same chords, but the chords telling you another story. And we had this often with German famous people like Peter Weihe. You had been in the middle. We do this on Saturday here also. Peter Weihe with you and Nils, the Les Paul Day. And you feel that these guitars doing something different with you. And we also try to find out why is it? Is it the electronic? Is it the wood? And everything is a little bit, but we also come to the end that the dot on the I is the wood. Yeah. And this is the thing that's it's your heart. The wood is the heart of the guitar. And it's very hard to explain. If I would play the guitar, you wouldn't hear the difference because I'm not a good guitar player. But if you play it, and we saw it today, or Peter or Nils is playing, you can hear the difference, and also you can see your face, what the guitar is doing with you. And this is a major thing. And you have people like Keith Richards. You give him a Telecaster, 52 Telecaster, like a Blackguard, putting 5 strings on it, that's enough, and he's doing the accords, and you exactly know what's going on. So it's his personality. And there are a few people in the world that, with the vintage guitar vibe, they make their own personality.
So, hey, Thomas, thank you very much for this kind of introduction into the world of vintage guitars, which is part of your store. And besides the vintage guitars, you also have, new products. So you have the whole range. But kind of one specialty is to have some of the very, rare, great guitars in the store. And you have a special room upstairs in the store where you can kind of by appointment, if you are nice, asking him, he will guide you upstairs and you can smell and feel those great guitars. Yeah, and for me, it's a big pleasure to, be connected with you and being invited, to do all this. So, yeah, thanks very much.
I have to thank you and have fun for the future.
Absolutely.
I hope we will work on this the next 30 years.
Let's see. Okay. Thomas Weilbier. Yeah. Okay. My partner in crime for tonight, Mr. Nils Finkeisen, is, he's doing many different things. One is he's playing in a band called Die Krupps, which is an industrial metal band. Okay, we can fix this in a minute. So, just to name it, I'm using this handheld microphone because the clip-on mics would give you too much noise from the guys outside playing whatever, acoustic guitar or dance. We will hear all kinds of noises in the background. But back to Nils, the Krupps. He also writes for the German magazine Gitarre und Bass. He does all the reviews on guitars, amps, and more. And he also working at the #1 Guitar Center. So he's a guy that knows the industry, the customers, the instruments, the amps, and everything from his own view. So, we come together. This is why we chose a stupid song by the Beatles, because the Beatles played here in Hamburg and with the Star Club. And actually in the #1 Guitar Center upstairs, they still have a few of the planks from the original stage where John Lennon, Paul McCartney were doing. Maybe John come together. I think this was later, but some of the, She Loves Me or whatever, Love Me Do songs. But anyway, Nils knows the stuff from different sides. I will hand over the mic to Nils and he can explain a little bit about his background and maybe, we go into the story how we get along with ourselves and that Iridium, whatever that is. So Nils.
Good evening, Reeperbahn Festival. Good evening, Academy of Tone. Thanks for having me again. We've been doing this a few months ago in our shop in this vintage room with all the guitars. And we've done a shootout with Fryette amps and modified Marshalls and stuff. You can see this in the playlist. Just watched down a few months ago. We've done this live stream with Lasse Lammert, very exciting guy from Lübeck. Good to my person. It's actually electronic body music is the genre that, Die Krupps play in. I didn't even know when I entered the band. Everybody was talking about EBM and I was like, question mark, EBM? What's EBM? It's electronic body music, it's not industrial metal. Okay, so that's metal without guitars? Right. And I play guitar in a band that doesn't have guitars? Right. Okay, good. They have been kind of industrial metal in the 90s, and nowadays it's a mix of 80s, 90s, and newer stuff, and it's very, very, we have many synthesizers. We don't have a bass player. The bass is coming from the synth. Steady 8th, steady 16th notes. It's a little uncommon band for a rock guitarist, but it's fun to play with those guys. It's testosterone driven, it's heavy, the fans are awesome. And we're playing tours again. like this next year in May, some European dates, and then again in August with Frontline Assembly from Canada. You probably don't know Frontline, but you know Devin Townsend.
Yeah, sure.
He was the first guitarist in Frontline Assembly back in the 80s. That was his very first professional band before he even started singing for Steve Vai and doing this Sex and Religion album, where he was the singer. And then Devin Townsend had a band called Strapping Young Lad. It's a metal band. And his other guitar player was Jed Simon. And Jed Simon was, again, the guitarist in Frontline Assembly after he left the band. And nowadays, Frontline Assembly is pretty well known everywhere, but not so much in Europe, not so much in Germany, actually, but they are huge. And we're doing a co-headliner tour again with them in August. I'm looking forward to those guys. There's so many connections. Do you know Dino Cazares, the guitarist in a metal band called Fear Factory from the 90s? They were the first band with trigger drums, kick drums, taka taka taka. And Dino is originally, I think, from Mexico and now living in Los Angeles area. And his second album was produced by Reese Fulber. And then he got into the band, and he's a keyboardist and a producer. And Reese Fulber is, again, the keyboardist in Frontline Assembly. So there's many, many, many circles. And it's crazy for me. I was born 82, and when in the late 90s, the band like Frontline Assembly was huge, I was a teenager. Same with the Krupps.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this kind of family in the industry, it's so fun. I mean, just being here, meeting other people, like Marco Vried, who is there with PRS, it's so cool. And tomorrow we will probably do something together, as the whole thing is kind of casual. And, I met Mr. Bräuninghaus, who used to be Mr. Fender for how many years? 27 years, 25 years. I mean, it's, we all meet again, and it's a small family. So, just one thing you learn in the music industry: be nice, because you better be nice on your way up, because it's better when you go down. You still have friends. Okay. I mean, we will talk a bit about your story and the AMP, but maybe I will kind of do something before we go into the metal territory. Let me show you some of the guitars that I just done today. I will start with a nice guitar, which I just pick it here. You can be the mic.
I can do this job. I can do this.
Okay, so Nils will be the mic stand. Let me plug in a 1967 ES 335, which is converted. Maybe you know mine. Mine is a red one, and it's older. We will look up the year because you are the experts. I just bought the guitars because they sounded great, and my ES335, which is at home, also comes from North Germany, somewhere from Oldenburg probably, or what. I don't even remember. Doesn't matter. It's a great sounding guitar. And let me play a few notes on this guitar so you know what the deal is about this one. Is a beautiful Gibson ES335 in burgundy mist. Yeah, and it has this kind of gold sparkle in the paint, which is very special. That's a nice guitar. Maybe can you bring me this 330? By the way, guys, if you have any questions about what we are doing or what's happening here, ask in the chat. As we can see, this is our little monitor and it shows your questions. So we are actually connected. Yeah. So this is a 1961. A beauty of weight. This is light as a feather. It's a 330 which uses two soap bars, P90s or ear dogs, or what's this called?
Dog ears.
Dog ears.
And non-center block, and that's why it's so light.
Ah, okay, so it's kind of nothing in there. Okay, keep it simple. Yeah, like a... Yeah.
Let me answer a question, because Dominic Pöli is asking, is a soap bar like a single coil? Actually, yeah, it is a single coil, and it is the typical Gibson single coil. before they invented the patent applied for humbucker, the PAF as we know him today. So the challenge for Seth Lover was actually, Seth, could you build something that is sounding like our P90 but that doesn't hum? He missed that target a tiny bit, but yeah.
Well, they missed that target, but Seth Lover came up with a pickup that used the same kind of magnets and metal parts, and it was something else. But to be honest, the very first humbuckers were closer to that sound than whatever came later. For me, being a more single coil player, I only like the early style of humbuckers for my vintage tone. But anyway, so this is my approach when it comes to humbuckers, to have kind of a nice transition towards the single coil with all the clarity and that dynamic and the punch and the twang even. If I have my Les Paul, I was always looking for twang in the Les Paul, what is wrong with this guy? But I found very old Les Pauls, like 57, 58, 59, actually do have something that I would call twang. It's, for me, the early Les Pauls are like Telecasters on steroids in a way. But some of the other Les Pauls that became too big in tone, they are not my cup of tea. So I'm losing my connection being a single coil player and relying on that kind of tone. But hey, maybe we had heard some vintage tones here. What is William Lee? Dominic Purley maybe sound like modern Ted Nugent. Can you play high-gain metal on a hollow bottle, or is there too much feedback? There is a lot of feedback. I think at living room volume, it's still okay. But on stage, you are the more experienced metal guy. So Nils would not try. Maybe Nils, you can talk about pickups and guitars for the modern metal world, and then finally even amp tones. But I mean, this is like the transition we can take from vintage guitars with humbuckers into the more modern world. And you have some special pickups there too. So I hand over the microphone to Nils Finkeisen again, and he might tell you an interesting story about humbuckers for metal.
Okay, the story doesn't start with the humbuckers, actually. The story starts, in my case, with having humbucker-equipped guitars, really like for blues and progressive rock, really mid-rangey stuff, very compressed, very dark pickups. Being in a studio with my former progressive rock band, and we used to play the typical Paul Reed Smith meets Dietzel VH4 thing that everybody and their friends is doing in the post-metal scene. Of course, we did with Eden Circus as well, and we have had 25 instruments in the studio for the debut album in 2013, and it was one Telecaster. I had one really good 68 Tele with a Bixby. You could tune the instrument, play 2 notes on it, and then retune the instrument. It had a Bixby, and it was, it didn't work. But for studio work, it was awesome. All those other 24 instruments in the studio didn't make it to the tracks, so to say. So we mainly used the Tele. And that did something in my mind setting about heavy sounds. And the funny thing is, Peter Weihe, by the way, has one 52 Les Paul with P90s right now. I guess he's bringing it on Saturday, I guess. And that's, again, a guitar that is capable of metal tones, you wouldn't believe. It wasn't meant for metal, but it's so stringy. Mm-hmm. And as you said, if you're looking for a good Les Paul, you're looking for a fat Tele, or for a double-track Telecaster sound. If you're looking for a good Tele, you're looking for a fat Tele that sounds a little bit like a Les Paul, and then you've got a good Tele. And Peter has 152 with P90s, the gold top. And I once had the opportunity to play it on his Marshall a few months ago, and it's a metal beast. So not everything metal is always connected to humbuckers, if you ask me. Not in the studio. But if it comes to live, it can help to have a humbucker. And if it comes to humbucker sounds, the biggest problem, in my opinion, for metal sounds is you need a strong upper mid-range, tight bass. You need a certain presence in your attack. And you don't necessarily need the typical classic PAF tone, which is a little mid-hollow, actually, and not really mid-pronounced. And if you gain a hollow sound out with a modern device like AMP1 Iridium or rectifier with a tube screamer, then you probably, you can get metal sounds, but they're not really tight, not really good for modern standards. It is pretty easy to push a Marshall into saturation, even a classic Marshall like this one here. Thomas has 4 or 5 of these as well, 68 Tremolo. Even with this guy from late 60s, you can play metal if you have a mid-rangey humbucker. You don't need the tube screamer, not necessarily. You need a good plectrum, a good right-hand technique, and straight timing, and a good drummer. Okay, coming back to pickups. This set here in my main stage guitar, Chevelle DK24, they usually come equipped with SH10 and SH, I don't know, 2, Nico 2 Pro, I think. Good pickups. But Andreas Kloppmann had an idea a year or 2 ago, and he asked me at Guitar Summit 2019, I think. He asked me, can't we do a modern metal pickup? Can't we make prototypes and talk about what is a good pickup for metal? And so it happened I was going to Mr. Kloppmann with a bunch of reference guitars. Stuff from PRS, like the old classic electric from 88 to 91. They had one pickup that's called Chainsaw, and that's exactly how it sounded. Stuff equipped with extremely good metal pickups from Tim Mills from Bare Knuckle Pickups UK as a reference point. And we, well, tried different guitars and different pickups. And then a few weeks later, he called me and told me, well, I've got one prototype, but you don't get it. It's not right there. I'll make another one. And then he sent me the second one, which was the black one here. And the black pickup in this guitar is actually not a neck pickup. It's the prototype number 2. It's a bridge pickup, but I still use it in this guitar because it sounds good. And that was like, okay, in Germany we say, traf den Nagel auf den Kopf, he hit the nail. In soccer we say, Latte und ab ins Tor. So you hit the goal and the ball is going right into it. Clock, clock. That one is perfect. The other one is similar, but I think it's prototype number 3 or 4, and it's very good, but still probably not the best one. So this went to series, the prototype number 2. And you have heard this one directly compared to your Strat single coil on a metal amp for a Beatles song. I don't think it sounds shitty for classical stuff. I think it performs pretty awesome if you're trying to do a fakey blues guitar as well.
Okay. Maybe you can show us a few sounds with that pickup and the Iridium. So you played some cleanish and overdriven clean. So Okay, so we could hear this neck pickup could do clean. Clean to mean. Yeah, okay. And yeah, what can you tell about amp sounds? I mean, pickups, we talked a little bit about it. Hey, let me know the story about the Iridium and you, how the whole thing came along, because this is like a thing that happens and, you know, things go as they go. Give me the story.
Okay, the story is long, but I try to shorten it. I own about, 25, 22 tube amps right now, actually. In the studio, in the shop, some stuff in stuffed in Düsseldorf or in the studio of Peter Keller, since we stuff our stuff for Die Krupps in his studio. Did you know the brother of Peter Keller von Maffei is my drummer?
Oh, no.
Circles.
Really?
Yeah, did you know that they went to lunch yesterday with the Klotz guys over there? Reconnected.
I had the pleasure to play with him one day. This goes back 3 years. And he said on stage, okay, I play with Peter Maffei. I'm known to be the guy who plays straight eighths and looking good on stage. Don't make me play anything harder than that. But he said it in North German style, like I play Schiff. What is it? Ship's engine, ship engine eights. I play ship engine eights. You know, like a big ship. And this is what he did. You know, he was really propelling the beat with his eights. So, and you know, his brother is your drummer. Okay, so go on.
Hello, Peter. Hello, Pauke. If you see it. Well, coming back to amps. I love old Marshalls. I love Dietzel amps. I really love what Peter Dietzel is doing. I love Fryette amps. You know it since we've did a Fryette comparison. I think Stephen Fryette is a genius as well as Peter. I love Vox amps up to a certain point, but I'd rather play a high volt. I have one from Peter Weyer, since he got rid of one from 75-ish. Awesome amp. What a tight, old school crunch. Well, long story short, you came along with this device, prototype number 1, exactly 2 years ago, exactly here. And asked me, would you mind to play a kind of clinic with Krupps songs with this device? And I was like, yeah, definitely I do. I bring a play along, some songs. I had maybe 3 minutes with this one, and you saw me smiling right before we started the clinic. And then I wrote a review for Guitar and Bass. You can read it. It's from, November 19, I think. Maybe December 19. And when that review was released, I had this one here with me on the last European tour with Die Krupps. And we played a bunch of shows, 20-something. And I had my favorite Marshall with me, and you know the amp pretty well. It's the one you used in the videos. I have had my D120 from Fryette with me, and my great and go-to basic amp, my Laney GH50, which is an awesome metal amp actually. It's super cheap, but it does a mid-range thingy. And I played my ordinary amps, and up to show number 5, I think. And then I was like, okay, we have time enough to double check what this can do in a band context. Took it to the sound check, plugged it in, and basically had a parallel way to my Marshall on the one hand and to this one on the other hand. And then it started. The guy over there, the front of house guy, Martin Schüller, he was really doing a lot of metal bands. I have a list. Second. Martin is doing all this death metal stuff and all this technical bala metal, like really hard stuff. Referenced Death Angel, Exodus, Cryptopsy, Ectomorph, Propane, Drone, or Heathen. So like downstroke metal. Nasty. And he was yelling at me, "What's this? What's that sound? It's amazing." And we didn't use IRs, we didn't use anything else than the headphones out. Headphones record out, straight to desk. We use the DI to ground lift and straight to desk. And that made me a little, I was wondering that he was so happy about what he got at the desk because it's so simple, actually. But if you have a bunch of synthesizers, second guitar, drummer, steelophone, which is like a xylophone played with steel on steel, really loud, people yelling and screaming into their microphones, you need something that is basically still hitting through this crowded mix. And that one is doing. I can show you what I did back then, and then afterwards I would explain an accident I did 3 or 4 shows later. Then, but I started with one sound, and that's this here.
Okay. As we can see, there's always a story with people getting connected to new products like the AMP1. And okay, what are your settings? Let me show it to the camera, or let me read it.
The basic thing was I was not using the modern channel but the classic channel, and it was boosted and mid-range up to 7 or 8 maybe, and bass and treble reduced to 3 to 4, which is really a nasal, mid-rangey and little dark sound actually. Let me explain.
Okay, let's hear it.
Later, we have a crew and we have a guitar tech, and he was not really fiddling around, but he missed to check in which channel I started to play, and it happened that I was on the modern channel.
By accident.
And it was crazy, since it's so much gain, it's so heavy, and it's still cut through the mix. I couldn't believe. I didn't recognize the mistake here. I just heard some handy videos from YouTube. The guys filming the band with a mobile phone camera. And then I had a closer look 2 nights later on what happened, and it was on modern. I don't know what our guitar tech did, if he hit it by chance or if he just tried to dial in something at the sound check. I don't know. Yeah, and that's why I play modern channel nowadays, actually, because it's even heavier and it does work with a tele. I don't have a tele with me right now, but it does work with single coils.
I find these kind of accidents very important, because then you are not biased. You know, it's all the stuff that happens because we all have our preconceptions. It's like, yeah, I know what I want, and I'm so special, and this is so special, and I dial this in, and now I know it. And then something happens, and you maybe reach another level. If it's shit, you learn it immediately too. But if it's great, it's like, man, what was this? I had an accident like that myself with my own amp. Let me explain. My accident was, I was using the remote one the other day in the studio, and then I had the gain, the second gain that I can dial in with a remote to reduce the gain. So, and what I did is I reduced the gain from, I think it was the classic channel on my Mercury, but I used the boost instead. So I had the same amount of gain, but coming from different stages. Man, this was the same effect. It's like, shit, this is magic, you know? And this is what it's about. So an accident or a fresh attempt once in a while is a good thing. So yeah, good to hear that you have these. And what about the settings in the tone controls? Can you tell us what the settings are?
Actually, I usually try to unboost with a boost. So I'm doing the slightest boost on the mid button. So it's counterclockwise to 0, but it's not 0. It's pushing mid range. like you would use the tube screamer as well with reduced gain, but to push up a mid-range maybe and cut some bass frequencies. With the telly, I tend to use the tone control very defensive, very dark as well, because we are working with single coils here. With a soundbox, it's about 11, maybe noonish, I don't know. It depends on the speaker cabinet, actually. In this case, and there's a question about speakers and metal. In this case, we don't even have my favorite speaker here. We do have an old 1973 Marshall cabinet with roller greenbacks, which is not a metal speaker. The box is the cabinet is fabulous, but it's not a metal cabinet. If it comes to speakers, if I could choose from every single speaker in the world, I would say the Marshall Vintage. So the original Vintage 30 from 86, roundabout. Close followed up by one certain, and you know it, Vintage 30 with a lead cone made for a company, I would call them Mordor. You're working with a pedal from Mordor as well here. And they once did a digital amplifier, Centera, I think. Yeah, is that right?
I tell you the story. I think it was about 2000. Eusen Kettner, I was with Eusen Kettner. We did a modeling amp, which was the Centera. And back then, it was even named the boss of digital amps by American Guitar Player magazine. And so it was a pretty good modeling amp at that time. And it still is. But me as a live guitar player, I thought, make this combo. We had a combo, a 2x12 combo, as alive as possible. And for this combo, I choose a combination of special design speakers. One was a classic one, and the other one was the lead cone, which is a lighter membrane. And that same trick I'm still using with the Blue guitar cabinets. So a lighter membrane comes alive quicker, has a faster upper mid-range kind of thing. And it was kind of breathing a little bit more live to the digital world. And it doesn't actually hurt on a tube amp. So it's something that came out of the feeling I want more, which didn't exist in the digital world, to give this extra aliveness. It helped the amp to be more alive. But once you had that, it's kind of an extra piece of butter on your bread. And who cares if it tastes great or it sounds great? It's good. And this is what we've done with this speaker. And I think you got one of those, custom made.
Actually, this speaker that was used back then in this amplifier is available nowadays. You know Torben Müller from Tube Amp Doctor? He has a product, and they call it New Old Stock 2003 Vintage 30 Celestion made in UK speaker. Guess what you get? Exactly this.
It could be that Eusen Kettner back then didn't order or took the full order, It's like, okay, we are so excited, and hey, we need 500 of these speakers or 1,000, and they never sold this many amps. So maybe they sell some new old stock. Who cares? I can tell you that speaker is great. And by the way, we're talking about great speakers. I'm a big greenback fan, and usually I liked those old greenbacks from the 80s before they moved the production into China. The China one, I never liked. They sound like a carton box to me. And I had very deep connection with Celestion back in the days. Ian White was their sound designer, or the designer who actually did the Vintage 30. And he asked my opinion on his speakers all the time. And then when they moved the production of the greenback to China, I got samples and they were not good. And they actually did a lot. They put the original UK machines to China, and they had to climatize the rooms to get the right of humidity and temperature and whatever. And it was a bit better, but in the end, it was not great. Finally, they decided to go back to the UK lately, and this is where we get decent sounding greenbacks again.
did a comparison, audio files and text comparison for guitar and bass last or pre-last issue. You can find it if you're looking for Celestion Vintage 30 and Greenback speaker comparison. There's sound files. The new one is exciting. It's really good. It's not sounding like these roller or like old pre-rollers, but it's a very musical speaker. Yeah, that would work for metal. Actually, every Greenback, every Vintage 30 speaker could work for metal. And if you have a super tight AMP1 Iridium, you don't mind anymore. Actually, it's not important which speaker of those.
Yeah, I mean, the Iridium is pretty flexible when it comes to the tone controls, and the amp itself is so tight that it's not critical to have a speaker that is not as tight. I can read a comment here about, hi Nils, what's your favorite speaker for your metal tones? I like the Celestion G1265 heritage speakers. They sound great for 80s speed metal tone. I like the 65s as well because AC/DC played them, and they have a certain pronounced mid-range, different from a Vintage 30. I think that's another very, maybe not as well-known Celestion speaker. Everybody talks about the V30 as an industry standard, and of course the tradition with the Greenback, where it all comes from. But this particular G1265 is a speaker that I would put in a category next to those. So this is kind of number 3 in that kind of gallery of Celestion speakers. I'm not saying they have other great speakers, but this is one of those rock tones that I like. You have an opinion on this one?
Yeah, it's one of the stronger speakers in their assortment as well. I would say it's not my favorite for thrash metal sounds, because thrash metal sound is influenced by the Bay Area stuff, so by Metallica and Heathen and maybe Dave Mustaine's guitar sound, and they are all more into the Vintage 30 stuff and playing their Marshalls or high gain boogies with a more traditional speaker choice here for the 80s metal stuff. But yeah, the AC/DC factor is great on those speakers, definitely. Great mid-range. And another pretty similar Celestion speaker is their Greenback with 65 watts. It's good as well, even for metal, but would not be my first choice. I still love the vintage non-30 from Marshall, the original, because it's so ice-picky. It's thrash metal. It's like your plectrum hits the note and it's ear-piercing. It's bright. Really, really annoyingly bright. And if you put a microphone in front of a bright speaker for metal, it works. And I like old SM57s, the Unidyne stuff, and you can't get them new anymore, and they don't make them like they used to make them back then. They're from Mexico nowadays, or maybe from China, I don't know. And if you're looking for that old Metallica pre-Black Album thrash metal sound, you gotta have Marshall vintage speaker and the old microphones, if you ask me.
I still have some of these old mics at home because they were cheap. When I was a teenager, in my first band, we had to buy microphones, and we got those microphones because they were the cheapest available. So I bought them, and now they have a character. Why not? So another lucky buy that I did. Here we have Dominic Pöli saying Metallica played G1265s on the Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, he's right.
Okay, so Nils says he's right. If Nils says he's right and you say so, it must be right. Hey, these bands probably played what was available at the time and then made it sound good. You know, when you read interviews about the old days, you know, they went into the studio, they had something, and they made it work, and there were magical combinations, and there were some combinations which were not so lucky. Maybe you can hear in the background the band and the applause, so there's some live music behind us. If we sometimes seem to be a bit not in your world, we probably hear the band. which is cool. Anyway, so G12 75 aren't the most popular, but they are my favorite, darker and big bottom. Well, 75s to me, that's my personal opinion. I have I have two opinions on this. On the one side, it can be magic for some sounds, and on the other side, it can be horrible. When I play this with the Strat, I don't like them, but with a humbucker guitar, I like them. I love them. So that's my personal opinion on that speaker. In the blue box is the Stack 1980, which is using these speakers, and this cabinet is using worn-in speakers, as my personal taste is a bit more to the mellow or warm side. This is why I reduced the treble even on the mic position here. That's my tone, but I think tone is a personal thing, and some people want it more open. I like it a little bit different, and everybody has his own sound recipe. But GT75 was very, very popular, especially with the GSAM 800 amps at that era. Marshall was a successful company, and the market was pretty flooded with this. This was kind of the standard speaker back in the maybe late 80s, 90s, or 80s more than 90s, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Any other speaker questions here? I mean, while we are just in the topic. What is it here? I like the Neo Magnet Celestians and the Vox Neo Dogs. Is this the creamback?
They have a neodymium creamback, and that's one of the more awesome speakers if it comes to neodymium speakers. But I would see them in another league compared to the old school materials, actually.
I do have one of those, which is, I bought a creamback 75 watts, which is a traditional one, and the 65 one. If I have them both. Don't quote me on the wattage. I think the Neo has a little less power, and the other one has a bit more. But I have them both. They are great speakers, both. But on the Neo side, it's good for a Neo speaker, but if you compare it to the old school speaker, I'm not 100% happy. I mean, if it is, how to describe it? It is a bit synthetic in a way. Synthetic. I'm missing some of the woodiness, warmth, organic, whatever it is, magic. I mean, I'm talking bullshit now, but it's like I play one note and it's like, yeah, but that. So if you want an extra light speaker and you compensate it with your EQ and stuff, you can live with it, and it's actually doing a very good job. But the magic that kind of drives me, where the sound is so great that I play automatically without thinking and getting inspired by the tone more than anything else, I'm not getting from this kind of speaker, not yet. But actually, I'm working on something like that.
I think it's the problem is the attack of the neodymium stuff. It's very, very fast and very brilliant and bright and short, and yeah.
By the way, okay, now I show you the secret here. This is a Neo speaker, and this is a BluGuitar speaker, which is of course lightweight, and it's fucking loud. And I'm not 100% happy yet. This tells you the story that it isn't that easy. Otherwise, we would all be already there and could buy any speaker just in a lighter format. There's a few obstacles, and it is not an easy job to get there.
But as I told you, and everybody who's now looking at us and listening to us, I'm annoyingly biting on this topic, but you should sell your speakers in your cabinets separately because they are that good. And I would definitely think about putting a 4x12 Marshall cabinet full of BluGuitar speakers, actually, and you know it, and you should ask.
Well, I've done it myself, but okay, that's a more political question. I know the speaker is good. Well, they're all good because all speakers that I do are kind of tailored for the cabinets. If you get a nano-cap speaker, I think that's the most versatile speaker. Works in any cabinet, but you have to understand the power is limited. And that's due to two factors. One is the magnet. The magnet drives energy. On the fat cap, there's a bigger magnet, and therefore the fat cap has a tighter bottom end for the harder stuff, and my stuff as well. But the other day I was listening to a nano cap speaker again, and the nano cap, I said, fuck, there's something right about that thing. Yeah. Do we have some, do you like Creamback H75 watts, the different to the H30 watts 75 hertz? Creamback, yeah. I think that's the one. I think I have the Creamback 75. Yeah. And the other one is the Neo one. But this, you're talking about this one, which is the standard one. And the G12 H30, which is another classic 75 hertz. It's, again, a super nice open speaker that works for many, many things, even in the vintage world and maybe the modern world. I don't know. I'm not the expert when it comes to there, but
I don't think it's that important. It's totally preference. You could put your nano-cap speaker in a 4x12 cabinet, and even if it's a little bass heavier because it's sitting in a small cap, it still would work with amps like Iridium as well as Mercury. It doesn't matter. And it's a pure preference thing. I don't like the GH30 with 75 hertz speaker cone that much, actually. I'm more into the G12M territory if it comes to the greenback stuff. Well, that's just because I want this classic AC/DC appeal again, and I wouldn't use the speaker for metal per se, but for classic rock. And that G12H30 is somewhere in the middle ground between the G12M and the vintage 30. So I'm always looking for clear colors. I want a clear blue, I want a clear red, I want a clear blue speaker, that's 20 watts, G12M, 15 ohms. And I want the most metal vintage 30, and that's the Marshall vintage. And if you want to play with a G12 T75 and you have a proper right and old one with the JCM 800, you're happy. That's good.
yeah, I see another question here, which is also interesting, about the Century Neos, which is Century was the one from Celestion, and then actually I was involved in the Century development. Again, back to my good old days with Celestion and in White, who finally retired, and therefore my connection with Celestion is lost, and therefore I work with other companies because they do what I want. But back in the days, Celestion did. So the Neo I was involved in, and it was a pretty good speaker, but I also have to admit that the Jensen Neos, the first ones, are pretty good for metal as well. You know, we have Manny Zeve with Godslave, and I was in his rehearsal room to check out, you know, his rig and what he's playing, and he has also this very light 4x12s for metal, and these are using the old Jensen Neos, and I was amazed for metal. probably not my sound, but it was like very evenly fast, straight in your face, makes sense. So cool. What do we have here? A question. Who did symmetrical music from you all, by the way, through I don't get this. Symmetrical music. Okay, that's too high for me.
I don't understand the question either.
Yeah. Another Red Funnel 77. What about the 70s Celestius G12S 55 Hertz? G12S.
Small magnet, yeah. They did some. I've never played one.
It's from a combo from Jennings. Okay, sorry, I never tried. There's a thing about magnets. Okay, what I learned about magnets is if you have a big magnet, you have a tight, very controlled tone. If you have a weak magnet, you have kind of a compressor built in because there's not the kind of energy that controls the speaker and the magnetic field, and thereby it has a certain quality about it for more the vintage guys, I think. But I played so many speakers, and I'm not sure if I played this one. Okay, talking about tones, while I have this beautiful Gretsch here with a horseshoe, we changed the subject for a minute because this guitar is here and it will be gone next episode of Tone. It's Academy of Tone, it's not there anymore. This is 1956. 1956. How old is this? This is a lot older than myself. It's fucking old. 6120 Gretsch Chet Atkins. I'm not the biggest Gretsch expert, but I can tell you this thing makes sense. I give you a few sounds with this. Let me show this one. I will start with, this is the master volume. Then we have individual volume control for neck and bridge. For the middle position and a master tone. Okay, I make some noise so you understand what this guitar is about.
Ölkalb.
Yeah, yes, you know, for a change, this guitar is another example of a vintage guitar that simply has character and which is inspiring. You know, I never play this kind of music, but it's kind of, if I had this guitar, I would start to make that kind of music. And it's not only because it looks like it doing this kind of thing, it has that tonal character, you know, really. The F holds it's not a painted on, it's the real deal. This is how it was back then, and this is the instrument that kind of music was made on. And then that's the fascination for me, is kind of a time travel back to the days of the origin of that music, and that sometimes it comes together and it's like, oh, that makes sense. There is the twang and there's everything you are looking for, that tone. It's already there, and yeah, this is in good shape, and that's an example of a guitar that has some character in that direction.
Can it do this?
Okay, let me try. Hold it.
Whammy battle. Mr. YouTube, you just demonetized the video because of credit claim. Yeah, it's okay. Tell him.
I played it out of tune, so the algorithm doesn't notice. No, the guitar gets out of tune because this kind of tremolo, you know how to set it up. I'm sure you can get it somewhere working, but me not being used to this kind of tremolo, I probably went too far doing the competition. Yeah, that's the thing. Bam, Balam, Bonanza. Hey, that's a nice. Is this played on this guitar? Maybe. Tommy, what was his name? Tommy Tedesco was the famous LA session guy who played all these nice movie scenes back in the days. The Gretsch is bigger than Thomas. Yeah, probably. Yeah. The Gretsch is another thing that has some character. Bonanza. Can you play Bonanza? I don't know. it has this kind of vintage twangy sound immediately, and I didn't change anything. I just changed the guitar. That's for me, back to the world of vintage guitars, a fascination about those instruments. You pick one up as your metal guitar, you know. Guitars are different because they inspire you to do different things. Play some Chet Atkins with Gretsch. Hey guys, I wish I could. I'm not good enough to play Chet. I only know that he is the maestro when it comes to the picking, and my picking is lousy because I'm.
Somebody is asking what's the device in front of you. So Strat, is it?
I have this device here. What is the device in front of me? Well, one is my Strat, but this is not plugged in yet. Make sure it doesn't fall apart.
It's good here.
Yeah. The device in front of me is actually, I have two devices for tonight. One is my Replex, which is a Echoplex. Everybody knows me that I love my Replex, which is my take on with Hughes and Kettner to do the tube Echoplex, which was the first generation. And it's actually velcroed to the floor. This is the unit. And maybe you can see I have the dual head time here. I can bring it a second head. Or I have one head only, like a classic Echo. And there's a time to dial in, and there's a single head here which is only having one head, and I always put this on a very long, spacey sound. And what I like about this is the tape flutter. If I go back in the vintage factor here, it becomes as boring as it can be a standard delay. Nice, straight, warm repeats, but nothing special. So let me dial in the vintage factor, which emulates tape saturation and tape flutter. Yeah, and it's like this gives you an extra dimension because the pitch changes, the overtone changes. It's like two guitars actually. Yeah, and you can blend between like neutral and straightforward to tape flutter. And that's what I'm using. The other device that I was using is a little old looper from Digitech, because when I do the demos with the guitars, it's nice to have something to record. Let's put this on like bypass, and I show you what a looper does.
Have you ever listened to a band called Pink Floyd? Do you know them?
Yeah. And the good thing about Pink Floyd is, I mean, they started with Syd Barrett, who was the first guitar player, and this guy, of course, is a bit weird, but he did the heaviest thing ever. That's a song. It sounds kaput, but I mean, how crazy can you play an E chord and then do the next chord, which is the accident? Let me show you what I mean. I was so impressed that somebody actually recorded that, but it makes sense. In an artistic way, it makes sense. Maybe you know that song. It's this. If you try to analyze this, I mean, this is an E major chord. Everybody knows that. I mean, this is first lesson of guitar. And the next chord is kaput because it's an E major, half down. And of course, this finger moves above the frets. So it must be an E major 7, flat 5, whatever chord. But this is also Pink Floyd. I'm very impressed by atmospheric sounds. I was fascinated by those sounds even before I played the guitar. I was listening to Pink Floyd when I was a kid. And Shine On You Crazy Diamond was magic and stuff like that. So, wow, the band in the background is going. Yeah. Yngwie uses mostly his fingers. Yngwie, I know he's a pick player. I'm not the expert if he uses the pick. Let's see what comments we have here. If you don't, I found that tape flutter recently in the Keeley Echoes delay. Love it. Yes, for me, that's the magic of tape delays. And I love them so much. I have one of those on every of my boards. And if I can afford to have one that's besides my Strat, that's the next thing in the AMP1 in my case. I thought Yngwie uses the Replex. I don't know. I know there's a few guys out there using a Replex. By the way, Brian May has one, or two even. But you never know. I mean, the other pedal that I've done with Houston Kettner was the Rotosphere, the Leslie, and everybody is playing that. From Jeff Beck to Joe Bonamassa, everybody is playing that. And this was a thing. I had to talk the company into doing it because it was like, what do you want? A Leslie for guitar players? And I said, that's the only pedal that wasn't done right back then. Now we have Ventilator and a few others which are pretty cool, but back then this was the only unique pedal. And the more traditional and knowledgeable the players are, like the Americans, the real Leslie, blah, 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 they love the Replex. Russell Sauner, it sounds like you have the time cube nut on your chat. Yeah. Okay, this is making fun. Gene Ray, the smartest man in the universe. That's another smart man, yeah. Astronomy domain. Yngwie uses one finger. I saw Roy Clark play guitar with his feet. That's another way. Yngwie uses delay at the end, and I see the light tonight of Budokan. Let me show this Yngwie thing using the Strat. Hold it. This is definitely not Yngwie, but we go back to E. And the next thing we do, we bring the feedback down. We bring the feedback down, we bring the delay volume up, and we get some decent overdrive. And then let's see what we get out of this.
There's one great question, Thomas, and it's a simple question, but the question is, how many springs on your Strat, on the tremolo? And I would guess it's 3, but I would add, do you do the Carl Verheyen thing? Do you try to make it work like thirds or something?
Yes, and I did do that even before I knew Carl Verheyen was doing the same thing. The funny thing is, I learned it from Carl. Well, it's kind of a funny story. We both did Schorndorf Gitarrentage, which is a little small town near Stuttgart. And I was a teacher there, and Carl was next door. So we had to play. The teachers had to play, and so I played with my band, and Carl played with another band. And then we both go, oh, you play Strat? And of course I knew who he was. He didn't knew what I was doing. And then it's like, okay, what are you doing? And he is very much in the harmony intervallic thing. Amazing killer player, very nice guy, and so on. I do my thing, but then it's like, how do you set up your Strat? It's like, I started and said, I have a minor third here, and this is on my website for at least 15 years. I don't know if Carl was publishing this 15 years ago, but I did. It was there because I found out that this is the way I can do some intervals playing even with a whammy bar. And the funny thing about Carl Verheyen, just to finish that story, is we kind of got a little connected and became kind of friends at this seminar week. And then I visited him at his home in LA, and then he was checking me out big time, putting on some country, and said, I saw you can play fast in Germany. Okay, let's check out what's going on with your country picking here. And then I had a hard time to follow the backing track because this was heavy. But anyway, Carl is a nice guy. Let me show you what I do with this, because we have only 5 minutes left.
I was totally expecting this nerdiness from you, but we never talked about it. But yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay, and to do this with a standard vintage tremolo, you have to watch that there's less friction. You can tell that I have to revisit my nut a bit because it's clicking. And the other thing is, I also put in some of the Teflon tape to get the wobbliness out of my... So there's no... Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we have to let you go, guys. Last question here. I don't know if plate reverb fits into a stomp box. I'm a big fan of plate reverb. I do own EMT plates too. And I plan to do an episode at a studio where I rent my EMT original plate reverb, which is huge. So probably we'll see that in the future, and it's a nice effect. I use this on all my records. The most unique and best guitar, Binson Echo Rack. Yes, that's another super iconic, great tape delay, analog tube, great thing. So to sum it up, hey, thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks Nils Finkeisen for being here around, and we hear the final chord of the band in the background. Come on, where is it? No, they're still holding on. So I think we both have to finish at 10. Oh, they have 3 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks, guys. And this was a live episode from Hamburg, slightly different than from the studio, but I hope you enjoyed it and had some fun. And, to be continued. See you all, guys, next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.